Oklahoma producers are getting out in the fields, getting ready to plant summer crops. So Josh, let's kind of walk through what producers are going to be planting this year.
Well, I think it's going to be a little bit of everything, and I still think there's a lot of unknowns. As far as commodity goes, we're still in a very unknown time. Nothing looks outstanding. There are a couple of crops we're hearing that are kind of breaking through. Sorghum looks to be kind of on the front of folks' minds. One, we know how to plant it, we know how to grow it. It's relatively cheap to get a decent crop. We still need inputs. That whole mantra of low input crop, we have to get away from that, but it is one of those to where a seed cost and an upfront fertilizer cost, and to see what Mother Nature brings us this summer, it's one that can be very promising. But pretty much a lot of our summer crops are in play right now, because none of them are kind of breaking from the pack and looking like the superior option this summer.
Yeah, in times like this, it's always a good, when there's a lot of unknowns, it's always good to kind of think about for producers for cropping systems and when to let a field go fallow and things like that.
Yeah, and it's important, especially when folks are planting and fighting weeds in season, a good fallow season. Maybe you add in a grazing component or something like that. It's a good time to control your weeds, to reset rotations, to do maybe a little bit of dirt work if we get the conditions right. So fallow is part of a rotation. I know we don't like to see our ground lay empty for long periods of time, especially if we don't have any residue. That's a big problem in Oklahoma, especially when the wind is blowing like it is. We see a lot of erosion potential. But if you have good residue out there and you have some things to take care of, that might be a good option this year when there's not a whole lot of good options out there.
For the producers who are actually going to be out there in the fields planting, this time last year we were dealing with some pretty historic flooding that went, into June. How has, weather conditions been so far?
Well, it really just depends on what mile marker you're at. Not even what county, but what mile marker within that county you're at is really going to tell the tale. We've heard some indication of growers are out there currently planting into really just pristine conditions, but we've also heard that as soon as you take that planter through the ground, you open that ground up a little bit, and the heat, the wind, the humidity kind of just sucks a lot of that moisture out. We've seen a lot of fields go from near perfect planting conditions to too dry to finish germination in a very short amount of time. So we are dealing with that, but then of course we go back east, and a lot of growers out there are dealing with, again, too much moisture.
In regards to for people in those areas that might have a weather event happen or they're delaying, are there any planting dates that they need to keep in mind where there is some wiggle room?
Well, for a lot of our summer crops, like our sorghums and our soybean, we like to see those planted before we get into about mid-May. By the time we get into mid-May, what we're talking about is really, really poor conditions that typically occur in middle of July into the first part of August that coincide with some really critical reproductive stages of those crops. So if we get to that and you just don't have good conditions, maybe you've run out of moisture, you're waiting for a rain and you just don't get it, we see oftentimes, especially western side of the state, just delaying it to June is your best option. So I've heard a lot of growers that have grown beans in this state for a lot longer than I have say that June 15th is almost ideal planting for most cases. And so we still have those options. The door doesn't close by mid-May. It might shut for a while, but we get a good opening back again when we get into June, because we do get more favorable conditions in August and September, November, whenever that is going through those later growth stages.
All right, thanks, Josh. Josh Lofton, Cropping Systems Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.